Okay, 1 mark question, multiple choice, quite a long question. So it says, which one of the following expresses the religious idea that one aim of punishment should be to encourage people not to commit any more crimes? Right, so this, for a change, this one's actually a little bit tricky because you might see not commit any more crimes and think it was A, reformation. You might go, oh right, yeah, because if you reform them then they won't commit any more crimes. Good one. But and it's not protection, so you can rule that one out. Then deterrence, it could also be deterrence, because that means to put off a criminal or an offender from committing any crimes. It's not D because that's reparation, and it's not talking about that because that's what happens after a crime. So you're either going to be thinking A or C here, and because it encourages them not to commit any more crimes, I think I would say deterrence here. I'd choose C, deterrence. But you could be forgiven for thinking that it was reformation, because that might also encourage them not to commit any more crimes. But I suppose deterrence just seems to fit slightly better with that one. And I checked the mark scheme and it is deterrence anyway. So, but usually for deterrence, I'd expect it to say something like putting off the people committing more crimes. But anyway, the answer was deterrence, so that's what you should put. I write the letter and the word just to make sure. Rightio, 2 mark questions, nice and straightforward. This is a really good one because it just says, give 2 examples of religious moral laws which some criminals break. So, you know, some criminals break any laws, so all you've got to do really is think of 2 religious moral laws. Okay, so I would just head straight to the 10 Commandments and just cycle through some of the 10 Commandments that you know here. What are some religious moral laws? And just write 2 of them down. So I'm going to go with no stealing and you shall not commit murder. They're both religious moral laws because they're in the 10 Commandments, and some criminals do break those laws. So 2 marks, nice and easy. Lots of time to move on to the next questions. Here we are then doing the crime unit, and we're up to the 4 marker now. Explain 2 contrasting beliefs in contemporary British society about the death penalty for murder. So quite a longish question. It's asking you about contrasting beliefs firstly. So contrasting means different. So with key issues like this or controversial issues, it's easier to do because you know that there are 2 clear sides to this debate that you've probably had in classrooms, and hopefully it's kept you entertained learning about controversial issues in RS. Anyway, it says also you've got to refer to the main religious tradition of Great Britain and 1 or more other religious traditions. And it's about the death penalty for murder. So it's specifically talking about people who've committed murder and whether they should get the death penalty as well. So again, with the explain 2, you just say 2, write down 2 points and develop and elaborate on each of those. Maybe give examples or something like that. So I'm going to start off by saying 1 belief about the death penalty is that it is justified because the murderer has taken a life from someone. Then that same thing should also happen to them. They might quote the Old Testament and say that an eye for an eye and a life for a life is fair. So it's that idea that justice is served. So then a contrasting belief is quite easy to come up with because most religious people would probably go with this one. A different belief is that the death penalty undermines the sanctity of life and it makes us just as bad as the murderers. They might say that Jesus taught forgiveness and that it is not up to us to judge wrongdoers. Okay, so again, just check afterwards you've made a point and then developed it with some sort of elaboration, and then another point on the other side, and then again some development there. and you should hopefully get 4 out of 4 for a question like that one. It's quite straightforward. That's a gift of a question, I would say, there, and should be able to at least get a few marks there. Right then, this 5-mark question is saying that you should explain 2 religious beliefs about breaking the law in order to get a bad law changed. Refer to sacred writings or another source of religious belief and teaching in your answer. Right, so the command word is explain 2, and it's religious beliefs about breaking the law, but specifically breaking the law to get a bad law changed. So it's added a bit of an extra sort of element to it there. So it makes these questions a little bit trickier, but hopefully, again, once you get that straightened in your head, that you just need to come up with 2 religious beliefs about breaking the law to oppose an unjust law, is how it's written in the spec, and hopefully you should be alright. So write down 2 reasons, elaborate on both, and then make sure that you've put some sort of religious belief and teaching in there. Here we go. One belief is that if you are breaking a law in favour of a loving outcome, then it should be acceptable, because Jesus was criticised once for healing someone on the Sabbath. He called the people hypocrites, as loving others is more important than following laws. So they had a bit of a go at him at the time for doing that, but he said he was doing the right thing, so it was all good. Then come up with another religious belief about it. Christians might also agree with disobeying the law as long as it is done peacefully. Almost all Christians would agree that Martin Luther King organising sit-ins for black people to go where they were not legally allowed to be was a justified stand against an unjust law. So, again, point and a bit of development, and then another point and a development example of that, and then scan your answer again. Just make sure you've said something that is a religious source of authority. You've got an example of Jesus and Martin Luther King there, so I think you would be safe to say that you can get 5 out of 5 with writing something like that. Okay, this is the 12-mark essay question for crime and punishment, and it's about corporal punishment, and it says corporal punishment can never be justified, and it's a 12-mark essay question, and it says that you should evaluate the statement, and then the bullet points underneath give you details about how you should do that, remember. So support the statement with reasoned arguments, give more reasoned arguments to support a different point of view, and then make sure that you refer to religious arguments again, especially important in these questions, because you could, in theory, write loads and loads and loads of pages about how corporal punishment can never be justified, but you could just include secular arguments, not religious ones, and you still only get 6 out of 12. So make sure that you put religious arguments in there. And then you've got to reach a justified conclusion to get the very top level. So, again, corporal punishment, hopefully you remember this, is where you inflict physical punishment on someone's body. So if you think about a dead body is called a corpse, corporal punishment is punishment to your body, as opposed to capital punishment, which is the death penalty. It's like your head cap. So try not to get those two mixed up, and focus your answer on corporal punishment. Usually it's not, doesn't happen in the UK anymore, but it used to be sort of punishment by whipping or being hit with some sort of stick or something like that. Anyway, firstly, we're going to argue how it could never be justified. Let's see what we can come up with. I agree, because corporal punishment would make the people who carry out the punishment worse than the offender. Jesus once spoke out to save an adulterous woman and encouraged people not to judge others. Hurting others is not justified because it is a violent thing to do, and most Christians are peaceful. Jesus taught that you should love thy neighbour as thyself, so inflicting pain on others is not the best way to lead them towards being a better person. Even though that adulterous woman was sentenced to the death penalty, it still applies because it's talking about them not judging other people. That was the whole point of that story, that Jesus said not to judge other people because everyone sort of sins. Anyway, so leave a line and then argue the opposite side. Why can you say that corporal punishment can sometimes be justified? Okay, so now you've got to argue for it in some cases. So, however, some others might say that corporal punishment is an effective way to punish people. It doesn't ruin anyone's life completely like going to prison might do. Also, it might serve as a really good deterrent and put people off committing crimes if they know that they might be beaten. They might want to avoid the humiliation as well, and so others could learn from the punishment. A physical pain is a quick way to administer retribution for what an offender has done. It might also help them to reform and be a better person if they realise that society is not going to put up with their offending. So again, leave a line and then come up with your conclusion. I had to think about this, not really sure what I think about corporal punishment. Probably not a fan. So to conclude, I'd say that in modern times, there's no longer a need for brutal physical punishments. We should try and reform people by helping them to be better. It's a more godlike way to act. That's my opinion. Luckily, I just started school the same year that they banned corporal punishment in schools, so close escape. So here we go. Let's make sure that we've got some points for and against corporal punishment and lead into a conclusion. Hopefully, if you've got those paragraphs and keep to this structure, you should be able to get a top level score.